Hi everyone, it's Gary Nicholson here. This is your Planning Outlook video updated on Tuesday evening, the 10th of October. Now, persistent southwesterly winds will dominate things through this weekend and well on into next week, bringing frequent heavy falls of rain to many western mountains. There could be some quite significant totals in places, and also frequent strong winds and gales on some days as well. A generally mild feed of air, though, coming from that direction, so temperatures above the average for the time of year. Now, this chart shows you total rainfall. This is through into the end of Sunday. Now, don't worry about any numbers on this chart. They are very, very small, but just notice the scale at the bottom. And really, once we're going into the purple colours, you'll see that we're going beyond 100 millimetres of rain. And it really does show what a damp, humid southwesterly airstream can do at any time of year, but particularly in the autumn season. Just throws moisture at the western mountains. Western Scotland in the firing line for most of it looks like, but even the Lake District and parts of Snowdonia seeing something 50 to 100 mil over a good few days ahead. And even Wednesday's rain across the Lake District could give in excess of 50 to 75 millimetres over some of the higher fells. So some significant rainfall totals in place as we go forwards over a few days ahead, and those will most likely get topped up even further as we go onwards into the middle part of next week, although confidence of that is somewhat lower. So a pretty wet spell, the ground very wet underfoot, rivers and streams in spate or flooding in places as time goes on. So just be aware of that on those western mountains. Always lower rainfall totals further towards the east, quite marked rain shadowing effects towards the north and east of the Highlands and towards the eastern side of the Pennines and the Scottish borders. We'll run through the charts then for the next few days ahead. Here's Wednesday. We've got a slow-moving cold front moving its way gradually southeastwards across England and Wales. It'll start off wet in much of southwest Scotland too, but the main focus of rain through the day is on the Lake District, the western Pennines and across Snowdonia too, where some heavy and prolonged falls are likely across those western mountains. Behind that front, still pulses of showers moving in to western Scotland, some of those merging at times into longer periods of rain. And as the freezing level begins to drop later on, some hail and maybe some wet snow getting onto the higher summits in the northwestern Highlands, but generally just those very highest tops. The strongest winds will be around and ahead of that frontal zone, and widespread upland gales for the Pennines across the lakes in Snowdonia, somewhat lighter winds across Scotland, but still rather a blustery westerly flow. A brief ridge of high pressure tries to build into Thursday, but further fronts just waiting in the wings over the Atlantic to spread their way in. So for many places, may well get away with a dry and bright picture. The risk of some residual overnight rain across Scotland, which may just be lingering into the morning, but that should all fade, and then bits of drizzly rain coming back into the Western Highlands as the day goes on. Occasional patchy drizzle on some western coastal mountains elsewhere, but across England and Wales, at many places looking dry. The winds will tend to freshen as time goes on. It could later reach gale force and quite quickly across the western mountains, so just be prepared for particularly western Scotland to deteriorate quite quickly later in the day. Lowest cloud bases then across those western southwestern facing areas tending to lower as those fronts approach later. A trailing, waving frontal system then is in place through into Friday. A lot of uncertainty exactly where the focus of this wave will be, and that's where the heaviest rain will tend to fall. Broadly, somewhere across western Scotland, even as far as the Lake District and Snowdonia in the firing line for some prolonged heavy falls of rain. Pretty wet across those western mountains, whichever way you look at it through the day, with extensive low cloud and strong to gale force southwesterly winds in place as well. Could be some very strong gusts, could be even 60-70 miles per hour or more in quite a stable airstream, which means that lee gustiness areas, say to the northeast of the major ridges, can see some very strong gusts coming through at times through Friday. Northern Scotland, if you are to the north of that front, you may see a somewhat better day, but just be prepared for some rain being around. But I think the northern Cairngorms, parts of the far north of the Northwest Highlands, could just escape with the best of a bad job for many on Friday. Still tricky though with the detail, so always keep an eye on your local short-range forecast. In all the written files on the website has that information there for you, updated every single day. Here's Saturday's chart, and that waving front is still around. Looks like it's focused more on Scotland at this stage as pressure begins to build across the south of Britain. So across Wales and maybe much of the Lake District, it's a dry picture, but the risk of extensive low cloud still within a humid southwesterly flow, with rain more focused on the western highlands of Scotland. Lower rainfall totals further east, but just depends what's on that front in terms of its general intensity. So could be a rather murky day across much of Scotland, with just the far north and northeast, again, maybe escaping the best. Sunday sees something of a trough of low pressure try and swing its way eastwards, a frontal zone trying to pass from west to east as well. It could give some heavy and prolonged falls of rain, but a lot of uncertainty. Treat this chart with a lot of caution. The detail really isn't there at this stage to get something too clever out of it, but the risk again of some heavy falls of rain coming into western mountains, which may become more extensive as time goes on. A chance that all begins to clear through into Monday. Low confidence of absolute details, but that low and its associated fronts pulling away towards Scandinavia may just allow a brief build of higher pressure into the start of next week. If that happens, things becoming a bit cooler. Behind that cold front, temperatures could be dropping even back quite close to freezing on the higher Scottish summits, but we need to watch the details. I think a lot to play for before we get to this part of the week. So not a great deal we can get out of things further ahead, but the overriding theme into the middle part of next week is that we've got a pressure pattern looking something like this. Now this shows surface pressure, the white isobars. The colours represent temperatures higher up in the atmosphere, and what this gives us is a broad ridge of higher pressure over central and southern Europe, but a broad trough of lower pressure over the North Atlantic. And the jet stream is basically found where the colours change most quickly. So we're into a broad scale south-southwest of the airstream really for the week ahead, which will bring further frontal systems in off the Atlantic. The low that's focused to the west of us looking like being the most dominant feature. So fairly mild, again lots of low cloud coming into those western mountains and the risk of some further heavy falls of rain at times. If you've not yet seen our social media accounts, they are shown on the screen here, so you can find us and follow us on Twitter and Facebook. If you've got any pictures or general observations of your time out on the mountains, then feel free to send those in and we can share them to build a picture of what the weather's been like out on the mountains. Our next video will be online for you on Friday with the details for the full week ahead. Thanks for watching, bye for now.